Hey everybody, welcome to Fishtory, episode 66. So we have made it to episode 66 at least. What I wanted to talk about today is water pollution going on in the Amazon River. And it's an issue, we kind of figured that. And the title of the new research paper, which came out just the other day, is Pharmaceutical Water Pollution Detected Deep into Brazilian Amazon. So it's been known for a number of years that there are lots of chemicals going on in the Brazilian Amazon, and that it's been contaminated with several hundred chemicals, largely due to sewage and wastewater dumping out into the main river. And it's mostly coming from urban centers in the region. Recent research in January of this year, another paper, took water samples along the Amazon, the Rio Negro, and the Rio Tapajos, as well as the Rio Tocantins rivers, and they found that small urban tributaries that pass through the city in canals and also just free-flowing in cities outside of Manaus, Santarém, Belém, and Macapa were full of these chemicals. So they found that these chemicals have the ability to affect 50 to 80% of the freshwater species of fish, dolphins, and other animals that come into contact with the river. That means that they can bioaccumulate in their bodies. Now, this has been a really thorough study, which is interesting, because a lot of times they tell you, oh, this chemical's in the region, or this chemical's in the water in this parts per million, and we don't know what that means exactly. Well, this research actually cited a whole lot of papers. You can go to their website, which is silentamazon.org, and I think they also have silentamazon.com. But it's a big worldwide project with researchers from around the world, and they've actually gone and talked about different classes, citing old papers, and talked about, okay, the dolphin needs this much in its system to be detectable, this much to make hormonal changes. The arapaima need this much, So they don't have everything in the river, but they have a pretty good sense enough that they can guesstimate that 50 to 80, that's why it's such a big range, are impacted by the concentrations they're finding in most of the river. Now, that first study was only on the main river, and they cited that the main issue was wastewater coming out and not being treated. And as well as that going on, they have all the nitrates, nitrites, ammonia, and E. coli, all the different stuff, fecal coliform bacteria, that is bad for the environment and can cause algae blooms and things. But they didn't go super in depth in that first study of the year. They collected water just from the main river. Now, this new study collected water from 40 points along 1,500 kilometers, or 930 miles of the Amazon, and was able to sample all over the place, including some of the tributaries and things. And they also, said that the same cities were an issue. They also noted that in the Amapá state and in the city of Para, there were high levels of these chemicals. So they found 43 different detectable pharmaceutical chemicals in significant amounts, and 40 of the 43 were found in waterways above the cutoff limit for the pollution level in the European Union and United States alike. Now, the European Union has an even lower level than the United States, but they use the United States levels. So in addition to the stuff I just mentioned that's not good in the river, they've found a whole lot of drugs for humans in the river. Everything from psychoactives that people take recreationally to anti-heart arrhythmia medications, high blood pressure pills, so antihypertensives, antidepressants, SSRIs, anti-epileptics, benzodiazepines, hormones, both synthetic and natural. And another big one was fragrances from cologne, body wash, perfumes, and deodorant, hair gels, and other things like that. So when you're taking a shower, especially in some of these developing parts of the world, you may think Sao Paulo and Rio might have a way to treat all these things, but they're out by the coast. So the ones that are far inland, it seems like, have basically never built chemical wastewater treatment plants, and for the most part, they just dump into the river. And the really bummer thing about all of this is that in areas 23 to 40, the number I'm on a map, in the Amazon River, the concentrations were 2 orders of magnitude. So that's not 10 times higher. That's 100 times higher when they were within 100 miles of the cities. Then when they were within 500 miles of the cities, it was still 10 times higher than it was in the rest of the river. And when they looked out in the rest of the river, they were finding things as far as almost 1,000 kilometers out from the cities, up small tributaries that are very small rivers, maybe 50 yards across compared to the main channel of the river. And they haven't gone and looked into little creeks and things, but during the wet season they have looked up the rivers, and they found that the main issue is that there's these fish that are eating other little fish that have absorbed these chemicals, eaten these chemicals and things, and microplastics are also a whole other issue. And then they swim up into the other areas to spawn. When they die, then their organ meat, like their liver and kidneys, gets eaten by scavengers like catfish or insects or other animals on the banks of the river. And then that is highly concentrated amounts of these chemicals. And so you can end up with animals that, even though the creeks are only 10 times higher than the legal limits for drinking water, they find that the animals themselves may have 100 times the level if they're predators and things, because of the way the trophic food web adds up, basically. So there was an international study done also in 258 rivers in 104 countries, and they classified the Amazon River, anything downstream of Manaus, as a site with priority but low active pharmaceutical ingredients. And that was in 2020, and that said that was due to high riverine flow and large dilution. But they didn't go into the tributaries for one. They didn't sample the fish for another. So that's why they did this study, the 2 studies again this year. The first one seemed to say no big deal, and guess who it was sponsored by? The Brazilian government and the Spanish government. Whereas this more specific and in-depth research, which has charts, graphs, all sorts of stuff on their website that you can check out, which is silentamazon.org, they were funded by the National Geographic Society, World Wildlife Fund, and a couple other conservation groups and universities. So it's kind of interesting to see the difference in studies also, and who funds them and what the outcome of the studies are, because they're all valid findings, but the devil is in the details. If you leave out the part about the fish having 100 times more antidepressants in their bloodstream, or in their mercury in their organ from gold mining that's illegal, that can be a whole nother story than if the water itself isn't that polluted in these remote regions. So, stuff to think about, interesting stuff. It's been going on in the US and we've known about it for years, but now we're able to really detect it and understand the amounts, and we're able to compare a lot of studies that have been done on various animals, or groups of fish anyways, and mammals and birds and reptiles and things, and understand where the harm comes in. And remember, a lot of people are getting their primary source of food from the river, be that all the protein that are freshwater fish, or be that the other animals like monkeys and deer and other things that live in the Amazon, birds that they're also eating, that some of them specialize in diets where they only eat certain things. You know how crows only eat like the soft tissue of carrion that's on the road. So a lot of the problem is also that the animals that are kind of the cleanup crew of the world and of the Amazon are getting the worst of it. Things like vultures and birds of prey are really getting nailed, as well as catfish and other fish that are scavengers. So I thought this was an important issue, and I wanted to kick things off with it. So links in the on my community tab if you want more info. I know this was a little bit long, but I think it's an important issue. All right, guys, back to you, Jess, on the Aquatic Morning Show, and I hope everyone's having a great week. Talk to you later. Bye. Hey, everybody, what's going on? It's Alex Williamson here with Fishtory, and obviously it's current events, it's scientific studies, it's historic events, it's interesting news and information from the aquarium hobby, freshwater and saltwater, a little bit of everything. But what I want to talk to you guys about in today's episode is a new study that was called Turbulence from Spawning Fish Keeps a Healthy Circulation in Coastal Waters. And it was published April 7th, 2022. And it was performed by the University of Southampton. Now, a new study has shown how fish influence water coastal ecosystems and how they can mix both the temperature, the salinity, and the chemical composition of the water. And why that's important is because the water stratifies into different heat layers, different salinity layers, things like that, as it gets closer to rivers and estuaries where fresh water spills out. And these are the regions where a lot of fish lay their eggs. Think salmon, think anything that comes towards the coast or even coastal shelf lines. There was another study performed by a Spanish team where they looked at even like tuna and other fish when they spawn, marlin and tuna and other fish. When they spawn in the top layers of the ocean, they said even they can mix up about 50 feet, or I believe, as they put it, 15 to 20 meters of the water column could be mixed up, and including plankton and other things, including fish waste being dissipated. The frenzy of the fish swimming actually mixed all those things up. Well, now a more recent study done in coastal regions is revealing for the first time how the fish actually help circulate nutrients from nitrates, nitrites, how they circulate oxygen, carbon, and other compounds in the water when they spawn. And this process is key to keeping these ecosystems at equilibrium, to keeping them healthy. The results were published in the Journal of Natural Geoscience, and they showed increased levels of turbulence and mixing that occurred every night, only at night, similar to the turbulence caused by a major storm that happens, they categorize that as happening 4 times a year or less, and then it calmed down in the day. What was going on during the 15 days that they noticed this? Well, fish were spawning. So the information was collected from the ship's echo sounder and samples collected with small fishing nets, as well as vials dropped to different depths to sample the water. And they were able to attribute the signal to shoals of fish which gathered in the area at night. And in particular, the small nets were full of recently spawned eggs of the European anchovy, which is has a Latin name that I'm not going to even try to pronounce. And it provides strong evidence that anchovies' frantic behavior caused during spawning actually oxygenates those coastal waters and shallow areas. And previous studies, like I said, they are also noticed that it could mix up top level waters, and these were big fish they were talking about, 3, 4, 5, 6 foot long fish. But now they're realizing that, ocean temperature, which can determine gender, and even river temperature, which can determine gender, are all mixed up and changed by the activity of fish. And I think that this is pretty interesting because in a lot of my filterless tanks, I use danios because they're extremely active, and they'll come to the surface, they'll make bubbles, they'll splash, they'll chase each other around, and they seem to be able to do this in low oxygen water themselves, but they mix up the oxygen enough that I've kept species like Pandagara and other things without an air stone, without anything moving the water, other than the fish and whatever convection may be going on. So it's kind of interesting results that if this can happen in the ocean, and if it mixes up things like the waste from these animals, as well as the good things like O2 which is dissolved oxygen, and it mixes up salinity and chemicals and any other concentrations of algae and things like that. It's just kind of interesting what the role might be in freshwater too. And there haven't been any studies on that, but there are plenty of lakes and regions where there are shallow creeks feeding into those, and whether it's trout or salmon or catfish or whatever it may be, they go up the river and creeks, and they kick up silt, which flows downstream, or whether it's the fact that they're mixing up phosphates that have fallen into the river and have settled or at the bay where the water enters, and at an inflow to a lake. Maybe all the particulate matter has fallen into the sediment at the bottom. Well, now they're realizing that it could be mixed up and distributed throughout the entire lake, or even into the water column, and then flowing out of the lake by these methods. Now, studying salmon, they've figured out some of these things. In particular, other studies that I've read have had that information. But I just thought this was kind of an interesting one, and it's food for thought, too, on what fish we keep in the aquarium, how much movement they have, and what role they may be playing in if you're using liquid fertilizers, if you're getting a lot of waste products, if your plants need O2, if your fish need O2. It might be not just spawning, but any of their activity. If it plays a role in the size of an ocean, an open ocean, and in estuaries and bays and in rivers, I think there's a pretty high likelihood that there's some effect, even if it's hard to quantify, within our hobby, within our aquarium. So something to think about. All right, guys, thanks for listening. Thanks for joining. Have a great week, and I will talk to you later. Bye, guys. Hey, everybody, what's going on? It's Alex Williamson with Fishtory on the Aquatic Morning Show. Usually I'm over on the Secret History Living in Your Aquarium channel. So, come on over there for all the sources and citations for this stuff. You can be a member, $1.99, you can get it all. You can unlock the kingdom to my research. See some of these price lists we're going to talk about in this video. So, I am regularly contacted as a YouTuber. They kind of assume, I think, in other countries that I have more money and influence than I do, because they send me sheets of wholesale fish. So, would you like to buy 200 Mabu puffers? Oh, yes, sure. Let me put them in my tanks that I don't have. So what's interesting with that, though, is I get to see a lot of trends. And I get to see these sheets that I've just been privy to since I've worked in fish stores. And I've also been friends with people who own businesses that get to see a lot of these. Be them very professional and organized, or be them sent from a cell phone in a list in, Notepad or whatever. So what's interesting is that I've been contacted by quite a few people out of the Congo, 4 in the last 2 months. And normally I don't get much information coming out of there. Nigeria is kind of where it's at for exporting out of Africa. Sometimes Cairo, Egypt will deal with some of the Rift Lakes and stuff like that too, or Kenya, Nairobi. But it's interesting because they're listing species that are predominantly found west of the Rift Lakes. So they're talking about Congolese species, Central African Republic species. And if you know anything about that region, you know that there has been some real instability. The Congo has been at war off and on since the 1960s, and essentially it's still in a civil war on many, many different fronts, many different factions. And you've basically got a military government and a democratic kind of wing of it, I guess, or republic wing of it, that's seemingly pretty corrupt depending on the year you pick. And then you have groups that control the rest of the country and don't care what the central government says. So needless to say, it's made it really hard to go down a river that's thousands of miles long and to successfully bring a boatload of something across, because each place you'll get intercepted, each territory that's controlled by a different group or a different, even they'll claim government, they're just not recognized by anybody outside of the local region. But we're not talking about fly-by-night operations. We're talking about groups with a few thousand troops, 10, 20,000 troops, and a lot of ammunition and weapons left over from the Cold War. So, as well as Libya, when Libya was overthrown Gaddafi, a lot of the heavy weapons filtered down into Central Africa. All the way up to West Africa, where we know there's also a lot of instability, things like Cote d'Ivoire, Liberia, and even northern Nigeria and Mali are seeing a lot of instability right now because of groups like Boko Haram and the Islamic Front in Africa and the Islamic State in Africa, which are extensions of those groups we've seen in the Middle East and Afghanistan, Iran, different regions kind of all throughout there. So what does all this mean? Well, it means that for the last 10 years, if you do see something for sale out of that region, it tends to have been increasing in price because it's hard to get these things out, because a lot of them require special care, a lot of these fish, and they need a distribution center where they can be acclimatized and then shipped out, or treated for parasites, at least fed, stabilized, given some water changes, because a lot of people who go collect these animals are collecting them on, wooden dugout canoes or old retrofitted, boats that are 50 years old with outboard motors on them. And they're sometimes taking 5-6 days to get to these places, which one means that actually quite a few fish die. And that's not terribly uncommon anywhere in the world, unfortunately, in the tropics. But what's interesting is that usually the prices have been going up, with fuel prices going up, with instability there happening and making it hard to get through the different areas. Now we're starting to see, I'm seeing Mabu puffers full grown wholesale, several different lists, right around $25 to $30, babies somewhere around $15 to $20, and tetras and Congo tetras, the Distacrotus, different things like Tenopoma, a lot of the bush fish and smaller different types of fish that are found in kind of swampy, deep sub river. So there's the Congo, and then there's things like the Volta, the Volga. There's all these rivers that also run parallel, and even a small tributary to the Congo is still a big river. And tributaries to that, it gets smaller and smaller and more remote. Well, they're starting to have a lot of fish from Nanochromis and Pelvicochromis, so reaching all the way up into Western Africa. It's normal to see that out of Nigeria and some of the breeding centers there and export, but it's interesting to see exporters in the Congo and in the CAR, the Central African Republic, actually having access to these wild caught. And then they're also seemingly, they have a lot of bichers or Polyopterus species, a whole lot of species of those, as well as frogs and things. So I'll share that with my subscribers. I'll share some of what's been sent over to me recently. But what's interesting to me is, with gas going up, fuel prices going up and all that, the prices are actually returning downward in a trend. And so I don't know if it's that one of these groups, one of these factions, is in control of part of the region and they've won the battle, so to speak, and so it's stabilized whether people like it or not, or whether it's just coming out of a few areas and people are exporting and it's stable enough because the government's gotten back control. It's really a hard situation to find out current info on. Usually we find out a year or two later what's going on. And the same is true of Ethiopia right now while we're talking about African fish. There is a war in northern Ethiopia, and not that there's a ton of fish that come out of there, but there's some soda lakes and things. And on the border of Kenya, there's some other stuff that comes out of there, like Lake Turkana jewel cichlids and a handful of other interesting oddities. So I just wanted to touch on that. If you're interested in it, come over to my channel, check out the community tab, and I'll post some pictures for members of the price list. I might do a public post too. But I just wanted to touch on all that. I find it interesting. Don't exactly know why the prices have gone down, because shipping has gone up. But I'd love to hear from other people who've worked in pet stores or have channels or friends or different pathways to that business. I just find it really interesting that the puffers and interesting morphs of the bichers and things that are definitely bred in facilities where you know, they'll get albino ones and things. They're going for $125. The golden ones are going for $75. The normal ones are going for $1.50 or 75 cents, you know. So it's pretty wild, but it's interesting nevertheless. All right, guys. Well, thanks for watching. I know it's a little bit longer and a little less specific with sources and citing things, but I hope you guys enjoyed just kind of a look into what's going on in that sector of the market with all the lockdowns and all the world issues and wars and yada, yada, yada. All right, guys. I'll talk to you later. Back to you, Jess. Hey everybody, welcome to Fishtory. I know it's a little noisier in here because of all of the water trickling, but I want to show you my very algae covered biotope because it brings up something that was recently going around social media, the news, magazines, you know, everywhere basically, and that is the Biotope Aquarium Project, or BAP, and it is officially on starting April 20th, 4/20/22. You could pre-register. May 20th is when they start taking applications, and July 20th is the deadline when you have to enter. Now, August 20th will be the start of when they're judging it, and September 20th will be when evaluation is concluded, with October 20th, the publication of results, and November 20th, when prizes and awards are announced and given out. So, who can enter this? Everyone! And it is free. There are no fees whatsoever required to enter this contest, which is awesome for aquascaping biotope contest. And any freshwater and brackish water aquarium is welcome to enter the Biotope Aquarium contest. So, you have to supply the following stuff. This is right off the website. So, in a biotope aquarium, you need to have the name of the biotope, an introduction text, a location of where you're trying to emulate, photos and video of your tank, its inhabitants, the aquatic vegetation, and its water chemistry. And with the species, you need Latin names of everything. And then you need biotope information, like what's the environment and the topography around the water source like, and any sort of bibliography of where you have gotten that information off of. Now, your biotope aquarium needs a title, and also you need to show on a map where it is, and then you just want to make sure that you document it well and clear enough. Even a smartphone should be you know, good enough for the contest. So the contest is divided into 8 categories, and according to the geographical ranges is how they organize it. So the first category is North America, second is Central America, third Caribbean and South America, and the fourth is Eastern Europe and Northern Europe, as well as Southern Europe and Western. Okay, it's just all of Europe. Category 5 is Eastern Africa, Middle Africa, Northern Africa, Southern Africa, Western. Okay, that's all of Africa. Category 6 is Asia, and Category 7 is Eastern Asia. So, and then Category 8 is Southeastern Asia, specifically, you know, Burma / Myanmar, Bangladesh, and all down through the kind of Indian Ocean, the Andaman Sea, up through the Malay Peninsula, Papua New Guinea, the Philippines, that area. and they will be evaluated on several different factors, including the following. So, what does the biotope look like in nature? Did you represent it? So, for here, I am representing Lake Inle, all the species, and right now there's one plant species that's not in the general region. In the lake itself, I still need to clarify that, so I'm still working on it. And you know, the other thing is, you want it to look like a biotope. So if there's mulm and algae, you want that. Now there's some algae in Lake Inle, but not this much, and I don't know that it's filamentous in nature. So I need to clean that up and figure that out and introduce the algae, if nothing else. Also, insects, crustaceans, gastropods, so snails and things, cephalopods, whatever it is that is in that water, you can put in, and they will give you points for it. So they want to know the quality and reliability of the information, which will be scored. They want to know about the variety you keep in the tank of fish and plants. They want to know if it's a viable environment for these fish to survive. And then they want to know if it conforms to what all that would be in nature. Then they judge the beauty and the quality of the materials from hardscape, and how hard it was to source the fish, that kind of stuff, how the fish look health-wise, and basically how accurate you are on everything. So I hope you guys want to join. It doesn't need to be anything crazy fancy. You could do a tank like the one below here. I've got a little breeder box in there at the moment. But this is another Lake Inle tank that happens to have some invasive guests, some cichlids in there at the moment at the bottom. But this is pretty representative, minus the kabamba, of a Lake Inle tank. And it's where I'm spawning out some extra fish for the contest. And we've got other biotope tanks in my collection as well. So just to give you guys a little bit of some of the ideas, you could have a Southeast Asian biotope like Borneo, or a Javanese tank like this, but they would grade you down on the fact that that's a purple variety that was bred in captivity of the glow light rasbora, whereas the normal one is also in there right behind it. So they'll grade you on things like that, and on if your plants are native to there, or if they're like, I've got a mini butterfly variety, which they may grade down, but if it looks really cool, if it adds an accent and a focal point, you may gain those points back there. And so they have experts and ichthyologists, ecologists, biologists, photographers from various places that tend to judge this, and they haven't announced the full list yet this year, but I'm excited to see who it is. I think this one is the one that Heiko Blair kind of started, and it's the other big contest that goes alongside with the one that's hosted out of Russia generally. And a side note on that, which is generally the bigger biotope contest historically, I would say, more entries and things. Their website is down, so the due to the war, it's a bummer. They blocked a lot of the data because it happens to be hosted in Russia, and the issue with that is that a lot of biotope research has already been done and posted for 10 years on that website. So I'm going to talk to Ivan Mikolji, Ivan, as people know him also, either Ivan or Ivan. He said it's fine either way. But we're going to try to sort that out and see if it can get hosted elsewhere, or if it already is and I just haven't heard yet about it. But kind of interesting stuff, and this will be the first time I've done one of the international contests, so I'm pretty excited. There's links in the description to how to enter and all that, and you've got till the end of May, I suppose. So I hope that you guys join me in the contest. Talk to you guys later. Back to you, Jess.